Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It is your Capes Crusader Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our new friend Oriana Leckert of Kickstarter. Very excited for this opportunity. Thank you for swinging by. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
No, that is so awesome. So you are the director of publishing and comics outreach with Kickstarter, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. You have a whole slew on your resume. I mean, crowdfunding consultant, culture historian, and much more, and so many different publications that you've written for. It was really impressive. Where did this all begin for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to now look back and be like, yes, I did all of these things on purpose to make my career, but it was all a lot of luck, a lot of gumption, a handful of accidents. Yeah, my background is about half and half traditional book publishing and digital media. I started my career at Random House back before they had absorbed Penguin, let alone begun to think about also absorbing Simon and Schuster. I've done a lot of weird things. I've been a matchmaker for ghostwriters and a fact checker for a book packaging company. I was a news editor at Atlas Obscura and a copy editor at MTV News. I wrote a book 5 or 6 years ago, which came out of a multi-year reporting project on under the radar DIY cultural spaces in Brooklyn and across New York City. As the book was coming out, my agent and my editor were like, can you write some other things so people can know who you are? So then I sort of backed my way into becoming a journalist as well.
Wow.
A cultural hipstorian was how I've referred to myself, because that really became my beat, just like chronicling all the weird art stuff that hipsters and their echelons were up to. So that's the sort of broad shape. Oh, I also was a freelance editor, proofreader, and copy editor for, I think, over 100 small presses and websites and magazines all across the country.
Wow. that. Shoo. I thought I was busy. How are you able to do that all? I mean, your calendar must be just worn out.
It wasn't all at once. It was over many years. Yeah, I don't know. Like to keep busy. I feel like if you are going to bother to pay the rents for a place like Brooklyn, you might as well make sure that you're getting your money's worth by being out in the world and doing all the things. I think my cultural reporting stuff also, in retrospect, was maybe just an excuse to get to know where all of the coolest things were happening and get to hang out with all of the most interesting people. So it's definitely self-serving as well.
No, that is really cool. And that's kind of what, I found with interviewing creators. I get that nice little, I get to read their comics, get to talk to them about the creative process. It's nice when you can make your job something that you really love to do. It's like, it's a win-win. So speaking of that, though, this isn't your first time with Kickstarter, too. It looks like from 2018 to 2020, you had a position as a journalism outreach lead. So what was that position about? And, what were you doing for Kickstarter around that time?
Yeah, so that was how I came here. The idea was to grow our journalism category, which is the second smallest / least successful category on the site. That remains true. But it had been really growing. In 2017, there was, I think, the three largest journalism projects ever, which was Tortoise out of the UK, Gothamist in New York, and Block Club Chicago in Chicago. They had all happened kind of right in a row. And so the previous publishing director, who was my former boss and amazing human, Margot Atwell, she decided that journalism was a growth spot and that it would be worth bringing someone on to sort of see if there was growth potential in that category. And I think, there was, and maybe still is. I did that for about a year and a half. I had a lot of really cool successes. The problem is that journalism is just not the same solid product market fit as books or comics. I mean, Kickstarter, obviously I'm a little biased, but I think it's the best platform for project-based fixed funding, right? You're making a book, a tabletop game, a dance performance, a mug, but journalism, the needs of journalism are fundamentally sustainable funding. So you don't just need money once, you need it every month because you're going to keep producing news. So that's one of the big challenges. I think there are a lot of ways that journalists can use the platform really successfully. I got to work with many that did really exciting stuff, but ultimately, at the beginning of the pandemic, or when the pandemic sort of got to the United States, Kickstarter went into a bit of an existential crisis because people stopped launching projects, which made total sense at the
Yeah.
time. But, as a public benefit corporation with no other income streams, that was a really dire moment. So anyway, Kickstarter laid off, I think 40% of the company, myself included. And it was not until it was several more months before things shifted around. And then anyway, they brought me back, promoted me to this new, bigger job. So now journalism is still a large part of my heart, but a small part of my job.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So what?
it is still under my auspices. I'm the director of publishing and comics outreach, and
Mhm.
journalism is part of publishing.
So what type of articles were you guys covering? Like what was the
Well,
articles
so
you were writing?
we weren't really writing. So the idea with a journalism fundraiser is like a lot of publications like launch on Kickstarter. What happened with Gothamist, which is the one I know pretty intimately. Gothamist is like a very beloved local news site in New York. It was bought by a malevolent billionaire who owned several other local news sites, including DNA Info and that whole network. And then the staff tried to unionize, and in a fit of pique, the new owner shut all the sites down, just deleted all the archives, took it all offline. And so Gothamist was able, because it was like pretty prominent and beloved organization, they formed a partnership with WNYC, which is a nonprofit newsroom in New York, to relaunch, but they needed to buy back their own archives, which had been taken
Wow.
by this guy Ricketts. And so they ran a Kickstarter for that purpose, to like purchase their literal own archival works, and also to get a good amount of seed funding to start the new chapter in their life. So that's the kind of thing that journalism can do on Kickstarter: launch a site, level up an organization. We actually count magazines as journalism as well, also podcasts. So all of those have a lot of
That is so
possibilities
awesome.
for fundraising too. Yeah.
I love how you use the word malevolent. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more colorful words we could exchange there, but the fact that they were able to kickstart to buy back those archives, that is remarkable. That's awesome. It just goes to show you that, you could do really anything on Kickstarter.
I mean, I think that's true. Yes. I think there are, like I said, some things are going to be easier and harder, but it is the contract you're making is you are telling people that you're going to do something cool, that you're on a creative journey, that you'd like them to join, and they can jump on board, help you out, get things in return. And yeah, that can really look like anything you want. It doesn't have to just be something sort of simple like a book.
No, that is awesome. So how did you feel when Kickstarter reached back and wanted to promote you to a new position? Like, how was that day for you?
Yeah, it was pretty nice. I mean, it wasn't like one day I sort of like I saw what was likely to happen. I was laid off altogether, I guess, from like May to September. So it wasn't that long. It was the beginning of the pandemic. It's not like we were all doing very much else. The Kickstarter was not on the like horizon of jobs I thought I was going to have. It was a real gamble when I took it. But it's now it's hard for me to like not sound corny, but it did turn out to be like the most inspiring and fulfilling work I've ever done. So I was pretty jazzed to come back and do it in like an even bigger way.
So what's all involved with being the director of publishing and comics outreach? Like, what does your day-to-day workload look like?
Yeah, I know that's such a nice and normal question without any possibility of a normal answer. I mean, my job broadly is to be kind of like out in the world of my categories, helping people get a better understanding of Kickstarter, figure out whether they want to use it, and then help kind of set them up for success if they decide that they do. I usually describe my job as like 3 parts: literary industry expert, crowdfunding strategic consultant, and cheerleader. That really is like a big part of my work, just like making people feel good about the work that they're trying to do. Working with creative people generally requires a good amount of hand holding and even some therapy sessions, let's say. But so, day to day, I mean, I do a lot of work on the site itself. I'm always looking at the projects that are there, recommending different campaigns to be featured in newsletters. And I also coordinate the Kickstarter Reads Twitter account. So with David Hyde of Superfan Promotions. So he and I are both always looking for projects to boost there. I set all the comics and publishing projects of the day, things like that. I am out at events a lot. I mean, I've done this job mostly during COVID, I guess like 2/3 during COVID. So that has looked a little different. I mean, I do things like this all the time. I do
Hmm.
podcasts and YouTube interviews, also webinars, panel discussions, all sorts of like digital events for, like national organizations and like their regional chapters. I'm just here. I'll just like pull up what events have I done recently.
It has to be nice kind of breaking out though, right? After being
Oh yeah.
stuck in the house for like 2/3 of it.
Totally. This year I'm finally going, I went to AWP, which is a independent publishing convention. I went to San Diego Comic-Con. Next week I go to Dragon Con. I'm going to 20 Books Vegas. I went to PAX with my games team. So that was all really lovely. But then, the other side of like being stuck in our homes is like I spoke at the Afro Animation Summit, which is a conference for African animators. I did Boston Comics and Color Fest. Oh, I did that in person actually. But I've done webinars for She Writes Press and the Independent Book Publishers Association, International Thriller Writers, also just like places that are gathering people from literally all over the world, which, I would not be able to see that many people in person. So that's a lot of the work that I do also. And just, being in touch with creators everywhere and wherever I can find them, having a presence on Twitter and in social media generally. I have written articles for like educational articles for Kickstarter. I also commission those. I've got a piece on how to build an audience for your comic, on how to do budget for your campaign. I wrote a guide to like each element of your publishing project page. So those are all elements of the work that I do.
That is so cool. It has to be such like a fulfilling feeling to be involved in so many different projects like that. And to be able to speak at so many different events, like, do you ever like find yourself like feeling like overwhelmed with it? It seems like a lot to do.
Yes and yes. I mean, in a way, my work is literally endless. I mean, there is an infinite number of people and creators who could be on the site, and like reaching them and bringing them in.
Hmm.
It's like a kind of a tall order. On the other hand, I am but one woman. I know that. Most of my creators understand that. There's a finite amount of work that I can do, and that usually feels I'm relatively good at, logging off for the day, at not really answering or being accountable on my socials on the evenings and weekends. I have a pretty robust social life. So I think I have a pretty good balance. I mean, this is something I say on cover letters, but happens to be true. Like my whole career has been in support of creative people, in one way or another, whether that's like proofreading a romance novel or writing an article about fire spinners, or helping somebody figure out how to raise money to fund their dreams. So it's something that I've always done and have a pretty good handle on when to do and when not. I mean, that's not to say that I don't like accidentally find myself at a party extolling the virtues of Kickstarter, but I try to keep some, good life balance in there.
It's essential to know when to turn that phone off to kind of get some me time, and I think that could be one of the hardest balances with doing a lot of this, because you want to stay promoting and stay on top of doing that, but you also have to stay recharged to do it properly. So, I mean, with Kickstarter being around since 2019, how do you feel about the crowdfunding game as it is right now? It seems like every other like month a new crowdfunding platform is joining the scene, joining the competitive area. Like for Kickstarter, like how does that feel for you guys as a whole to see all these new forces rising up with you?
Yeah, I think, so first, Kickstarter was founded in 2009, not 19, which I know you know.
Oh, nine. I misread it.
I just wanted to like say it out loud in case people are confused. I think competition is healthy in any sort of area. Our comms director gave me a nice line that I used in an interview recently, that Kickstarter's goal is mission, not market share. We do not want or try to be all things to all people. And I think, particularly when I was doing journalism, I talked to a lot of creators and wound up saying, look, you're going to be better off on Patreon or on Substack or doing some sort of like, DIY subscription software. I definitely think there are lots of options for people, and that's really nice. I mean, Kickstarter, our whole mission is to help bring creative projects to life. And so we want creativity to thrive anywhere and everywhere, on or off our platform. So I think it's fine. I think it's exciting that people have a lot of choices. And I think it's even more exciting when people choose to be on Kickstarter, because
Yeah.
they're here not by default, but by decision. And that's really lovely.
No, absolutely. I've been doing this since February. Since then, I've done, I want to say, roughly about 153 interviews, and of those, I want to say 80% of them, if not more, were on Kickstarter. I've probably looked at more Kickstarter. I know how to make a Kickstarter, and I don't even create comics. Just I love just how organized and just fluid it is. Like it's streamlined, the process of just scrolling down the page, and I really like how everything is set up. So with that being said, on the topic of campaigns, what would you say are some of the biggest do's and don'ts with running a campaign on Kickstarter? What are some of the tips that you might have for creators to make the most with theirs?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the obvious stuff is make a well-organized, well-written, proofread, compelling project page. You want Kickstarters on the internet. You want a nice balance of text and images. So because the internet is a visual medium, you also want to think about how to draw people in. Again, coming out of my journalism life, you want to keep the most important information above the fold, which I don't know, maybe that's a phrase that's becoming obsolete since like newspapers are dying. But I would, for a modern retelling, think about somebody looking at your campaign on their phone. All they're going to see is title, subtitle, project image, and maybe like the first sentence. You got to sell them in just that amount of space. At least sell them enough to scroll through and like get deeper into what you're doing. Even working with almost exclusively writers, it is wild to me how difficult it is for creators to describe their own work in any sort of succinct way. So that's the first thing to think about. Make sure that you're making yourself trustworthy and honest. So, telling your story in a way that excites people and compels them, but also makes them believe that you're going to be able to do the things that you're promising to do with the campaign. I also think understanding your network and your reach is really, really crucial. I think finding, the thing that I think is the biggest predictor of not being successful is there being a mismatch between what you need and what you can get. We'd all love $1 million to make, deluxe editions of our written work. But if you're an emerging writer and you've got a relatively small following, running a campaign for, 5-6 figures, it's probably not going to yield you a lot of success. I mean, this is a slightly corny line, but like everybody thinks about the funding part of crowdfunding. Not everybody thinks about the crowd. That's the heart of what you're doing here is you're assembling your crowd. And so understanding who is in your crowd, where they are, how to reach them is almost as important as having, the most exciting, beautiful comic that's ever been written.
That is, I love that, thinking of the crowd that you're selling to. That is very important. We have a CM Holy over on YouTube, the best comic interviews on YouTube. You know it. My good friend Chris Moses, he's ran actually several Kickstarter campaigns, the Saturn Effect, and then now he's doing the Bogart, which I think is releasing in September. So we just had him on a few episodes as well. I love that was just such a powerful thing. Above the fold was good. I'm old enough to read newspapers, so I know about that. But I really like speaking to the crowd too. Do you find yourself do shorter campaigns work or longer campaigns? Like, what would you say would that balance would be? Maybe like a shorter one with straight to the point, or a longer one that's more in depth? I know that's kind of like a harder to answer question, but I guess what would you say in your opinion would be the better of the two?
I mean, so you're saying like as in number of words, not like number of days that the campaign is running?
Well, yeah. Just we'll do like an average like 30-day campaign. Like So you have A and B. One's like a more short to the point campaign, shorter scroll. The other one's a little bit longer scroll, a little bit more in depth though.
So the answer is it really depends. And I don't say that to be cagey. I think this is where it becomes really important to know your crowd and to know your readers. If you can describe the whole thing really quickly and there's not going to be any lingering questions and that's enough to get your readers excited, great. If you want to kind of relax into a longer description of, the sort of broader context around the work that you're doing, your budgets, your timeline, your inspirations, your collaborators, like all of those things are fine. I think in a way, the answer is both. I mean, if you can figure out how to properly prioritize and arrange the information that you've got, you should take as long as you want to tell everything, with just knowing that a certain percentage of your readers are not going all the way down the page. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I don't think that, unless you've got really critical information thousands of words down where it's going to get missed, it doesn't matter how long it is.
No, I think that's a good one too. Because, like I said, I'm the consumer in this matter. Really, I look at the Kickstarter, but I've never created one, so I don't really know like what all goes into it. I just know for me, sometimes a shorter scroll can be a little bit nicer. You kind of get to the bottom, can see the rewards, the tiers a little bit quicker. Sometimes it's nice seeing a little bit more interior as well. Now, still on the subject of campaigns, though, what would you say are some of the more like underutilized features? I know some creators really want to get people to like leave comments on updates and stuff, but I mean, is there any features of a Kickstarter that people really aren't using that they should be, or they should take a look at?
I think the biggest one is the custom referral tags. And this is kind of like a 201 level feature, but in your creator dashboard, there's a section where you can make your own referral tags. And that's, you can do that for anything from, if you're sending if you've got an amplifier who's going to be sharing your campaign, you can give them their own custom ref tags so that you can see how many backers they've brought in. You could do ones for each of your social platforms. You can do ones for various newsletter sends, and it's a way to get much more granular about where your backers are coming from. I mean, our dashboard breaks down for you who's coming from Facebook, who's coming from, this or that press outlet, etc. But especially with emails, it's hard to tell. The biggest line in every campaign is, it says like direct traffic, no referral information. And that's typically from individual emails. So if you're sending emails to, different segments of your crowd, for example, you can make ref tags for your fantasy fans, your people who like games, your, different things like this. You can A/B test, different ways of different tweets, like anything like that. I would say that I'm very surprised that more people don't use that function, just so that they can get more clarity on what's working and what isn't.
I've never heard of that, to be honest. I've never really seen other people. You're right. That is something, and it would make sense too with the algorithms, like trying to see like where people are coming for. Why, you could even get more in depth to see like what podcasts are bringing you what views and stuff and what backings. It sounds like it goes hand in hand.
Podcasts, you'd have to be a little bit careful, because what a custom ref tag is it's just like, I don't know, 10 characters that go on the end of a URL. So on an audio medium, you'd have to say like, so if you want to back my campaign, go to kickstarter.com/, you'd have to speak out the whole URL, which is, doable, and you could make it cute, but it's a little easier when it's like on, socials for press, for, various different written stuff. Or even better, clickable links where like nobody even knows what stuff is like tacked onto the end of that URL.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So for people who, let's say, have ran a successful Kickstarter and they're getting ready to run a second one, what are some of the do's and don'ts for running, successful campaigns in a row or in succession?
Yeah, totally. I think Kickstarter is an excellent tool for building your audience, but that gap between first to second, it is actually a really interesting moment, because, so much of the Kickstarter kind of proposition is like, you're starting with your inner circle, your friends and family, especially for your first campaign. They're going to be a really big part of your base, which is, so lovely. But your second campaign, a lot of those people are going to say, all right, well, I already backed you. I'm not going to. But this is your opportunity to shift from like, your inner circle to your actual readers. And that's where, you'll want to cultivate your audience even more. And once you can do that, getting over that hump, shifting from people who are backing just because they like you or feel a sort of familial obligation to you, into people who are really excited to read the next chapter of your book, that's like a huge triumph. So if you can like get that hump, we actually see the success rate goes upward dramatically as people do more and more campaigns. And I think something like 51% of creators in comics launch a second campaign within 12 months from their first. So it's clearly a really excellent tool and can be extremely successful.
Oh, absolutely. And one feature I really love too is the pre-launch too. After they have a successful campaign, they'll often have a pre-launch up in a few weeks and have that going. What do you think is a good time frame? You know, is that kind of just really dependent on the creator, or should people wait maybe a month or two before running another campaign? Like, what's a good time frame to be doing that?
Sure. Well, so firstly, you have to, per Kickstarter's rules, you have to fulfill your first project before you can launch the next one. So unless you are, I mean, there are ways in which you could do it very quickly, fulfillment, but you're probably not likely to be able to do it like, literally next month. In fact, what we recommend strategically is that if you can launch your campaign just after you have launched campaign 2, just after you've fulfilled campaign 1, possibly even like tease the second one with the rewards that you're sending out for the first one. That's a good way to sort of like have one feed right into the other, because as people are getting their books or their rewards, they're already excited. They're thinking about you. They're maybe even like tweeting about, this cool book or like bookmark or whatever it is that they've received. So that's a great moment to capitalize on the momentum and just launch yourself into the sort of next phase.
No, that is awesome. And one last thing. So speaking of campaigns, what advice would you have for creators that might be dealing with stress and anxiety of running one, because it can be, it seems like it can be a stressful situation for some people. So what advice would you have for creators in that situation?
I have a lot of advice that nobody's going to take. Like, do not refresh your campaign page every 30 seconds. And, walk away and go on a bike ride or play with your kids or eat a nice meal and, wait to see. I mean, I think the best way to stave off stress and anxiety is like really good planning. If you've worked out before you launch what, a basic outline for what all of your promotional plans are going to look like, pre-written those social posts and, done your press release and set up all of your newsletter templates so that things are just easy to deploy while the campaign is live. All of that is going to help you. I think as with anything, figure out what it is that is a stress reliever for you, whether that's chocolate cake or yoga or, running a marathon, and make sure that you're planning in time to do that throughout the campaign, giving yourself plenty of time to walk away and just let all the groundwork that you've laid sort of like bring things to fruition.
No, I think a big thing is having time to breathe. There's been a couple times where I've interviewed people and I've heard the click, the double click for it to refresh, and then 5 minutes later hearing the click, and it's like, all right, like I get it. Breathe a little bit. We have Cross Comics over on YouTube stopping in to say hello all. Welcome to the stream, Cross. Nice to have you as well. So before we wrap things up completely, I always love asking my guest one question in particular. For anyone out there who is a new creator, maybe they're having struggles writing a comic or just getting it started, what type of advice would you have for them to kind of help break through that barrier?
Like a writer's block barrier?
Yeah, or even just any sort of creation barrier.
Honestly, I think pretty similar answers to, the previous question. Go do the thing that is not your creative work to give your brain a rest. A writer I really like, Delia Kai, who writes for, I want to say Vogue. I've knew her before she was quite that fancy. She had an essay not too long ago about inputs and outputs, which, particularly during the pandemic, we stopped doing stuff. And so I experienced this. I would hang out with my best friend every weekend and we'd go, how was your week? I don't know. I read, I watched TV like nothing happened. So if you're not inputting things, experiences, ideas, pretty colors, pictures, you will have so much less to output. So I think a good way to get over any creative blocker is to just go and have a different kind of experience. Go to a museum or go to a gallery show that you think you're going to hate. You can often be inspired by like art you don't like just as much as art that you do. Or again, like eat a good meal, play with a child, roll around in the grass, go for a swim, just do something that is like totally separate to let your brain sort of like settle a little bit. And I think that often it's surprising and delightful what begins to like burble up after you do that.
I like that way of looking at it, because a lot of people, just sit and just try to get it forced out of their head. when if they in reality just went out and had fun, that could inspire just what they need. And that is such an awesome piece of advice. So what's next for you? What can we expect from you in the future?
I will be here. I will be here and traveling a lot more. Like I said, I'm going to Atlanta in a couple of weeks. Then there's New York Comic Con after that, and then going to Vegas, and then maybe PAX Unplugged in December. Kickstarter has been doing a lot of cool stuff lately. We're like releasing a lot of new features, trying to be much more responsive to our creator community. So hopefully, the platform is going to be improving each day. Certainly, you can follow Kickstarter Reads on Twitter. That's at Kickstarter Read without the S because we ran out of characters. But we're always, there promoting projects, sharing press, talking about new Kickstarter stuff. I'm on the internet at Oriana BKLYN for Brooklyn, obviously. So you can see, I tweet about stuff like going to vote yesterday and like the lowest turnout election that New York has ever seen. So I'm like a fascinating follow, obviously. I don't know, more of the same, more and better of the same until I can't do it anymore.
No, absolutely. Well, everybody, this has been such an awesome talk. Oriana, thank you for coming by, breaking down Kickstarter and everything in between. This has been a really awesome conversation. Everyone watching, it is New Comic Book Day. Treat yourself to a new book by going to Kickstarter and backing one of thousands of projects. How many are you able, is there any idea of how many projects are currently running right now?
Yeah. I mean, on the whole site, I think there's usually like 5,000 on any given but that's site wide. In comic, in my categories, I think like 100 to 200 projects launch each week. So
that's still impressive. Holy
it's a lot.
crap.
Oh yeah. But thank you, Cody, because that's excellent advice. Even whether you are thinking of doing a Kickstarter campaign or not, it is always like a really nice way to feel good to like go on the site, browse around, spend, $5, $10, $25 on like helping some sweet art creative person realize their dreams. It's really nice. It'll make you feel
good. Funding their passion inspires passion within you. It works hand in hand. You guys know what to do. Check it out. New Comic Book Day. Everyone watching, have an awesome Wednesday, but most importantly, keep it geekly.